Thank you for joining us. Lucien Smith is with us, former chair of the Mississippi GOP. Good morning, sir. Got your coffee?
Oh, absolutely. Just got it there, Paul. How you doing?
Did he do a good job on that one? Is it okay? It's not too strong.
Always does. Always does. With the coffee and on the air.
Get your money back if it doesn't work out. Man, where do we? By the way, one thing in the state senate yesterday, I was watching for a long time. There was a lot of appropriations and things such as that. We're at that point in the get down to business as far as House and Senate. But the state senate did approve a bill yesterday to take over the city of Jackson's water system amid decades of issues. The Senate Bill 2628 passed 35-14. Jackson's third-party water manager, Ted Hennepin, expressed his approval of the legislation upon it being introduced. So it's going to cause some controversy. Some people didn't like that, but the full story is on our SuperTalk website. Any comments about that?
Look, I think that is a testament to the leadership of Delbert Hosemann and to Senator David Parker. That's something that's been worked on for a long time, and the fact that it passed overwhelmingly speaks to the fact that it's such a good idea. I mean, Jackson has proven time and time again that they are unable to run a water system that gets clean, reliable water to people on a regular basis, and that is third world country stuff, and we need to have a governance system for that water system that guarantees that the ratepayers of the Jackson water system get clean, safe water, but also reliable water. And you don't often have to talk about that in the context of a water system. People need to know that when they turn their tap on or go to flush a toilet, you're not going to have the same instance you had 2 years ago where you go, well, we're just not going to have water for a little while. I mean, that is absurd. And I really appreciate Governor Hosemann and Senator Parker being willing to take that on, because it would have been a lot easier to say, look, that's not a state political issue. This is kind of a local issue to Jackson. That's a Jackson problem. And I think they deserve a lot of credit. I hope some version of that bill goes to the governor's desk and then he signs it.
Yeah, and while you're sitting there fighting over this thing constantly, the people suffer in the city of Jackson. Not only that, they suffer in a multitude of ways. No water at their own spigot, but the businesses are closing down because they can't take this and leaving. Then you hurt the tax base, and it's just a vicious circle there. That you had Jackson delegation, all of them were Democrat senators against it. Senator David Blunt, no. John Horn, no. Hillman Frazier, no. Solly Norwood, no. And nobody can come together on that one. It's a political turf, and the victims are the people, the voters, and the taxpayers.
Absolutely. It is the people who use that water system who are the ones who suffer. I'm glad to see that it's moving forward. It's something that I've personally been pushing for about 4 years now, and I think it's a great effort.
From the former chairman of the Mississippi GOP, your analysis and insight on the election last night.
I tell you what, for purposes of radio, it's not that interesting. I mean, it was essentially all of the results that you expected. To the extent that there was anything interesting, I think it was the Gannon-Burton getting some northeast Mississippi counties. I think that was the one thing that was unexpected. That's an area that Senator Wicker represented when he was in the House. It's an area, I mean, that is where he grew up in Pontotoc and lives in Lee County now, and so you would have expected him to overperform there. But that said, Paul, that is a very populous region of the state. You know, that is the old TVA Democrats by and large in that pocket of the state, and Roger is certainly not a populist, and so it makes sense as we've got this sort of growing populist trend among the Republican primary electorate that you would have seen the most populist area of the state vote for the more populist candidate. I don't think that'll matter in the general election.
It was a weird situation too to have a commercial running talking about how strong you are at the border when you had a chance to stand up for the border, and I understand all of the minutia behind it as far as the military contracts and the Ukraine and all of that, but it was a juxtaposition of a political ideology right in the middle of the campaign, and I think some people found that was a little hypocritic in just the way it played out.
Yeah, I will say, look, I would have voted no on the minibus that that Senator Wicker voted yes on, but that said, it says a lot about Senator Wicker, even if you disagree with him, even if you would argue that you're more conservative than him. The fact that in the middle of an election, 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks before a primary election, he chose to vote the way that he thought was best, knowing that that was going to be wildly unpopular with the Republican primary voters, I do think speaks to his character, even if substantively I may have some questions.
Let me ask you this, and I'm trying to get the timeline. Did he made that vote prior to Mitch McConnell deciding to step down in his office?
I think he made that vote after McConnell announced that he was stepping down. Yeah, okay. I think the timeline was he announced he was stepping down. Senator Wicker made the vote, and then we had the election yesterday.
When you hear the results as far as presidential, it's the presumptive candidate, and the reason it's the presumptive candidate, Donald Trump, is why.
So technically, if you really want to get in the weeds, the presidential nominees are not the nominees until the national conventions formally choose them. But the way it works in practice now, unlike 40, 50 years ago, the delegates are bound to vote by the way that the state primary election happens. So 90% of Mississippi, more than 90%, but over 90% of Mississippi Republican primary voters voted for Donald Trump. The way the state party allocates delegates, that means 100% of our 43 delegates will be bound to vote for Donald Trump when they go to the convention this year. And that doesn't mean that they're going to be dragged kicking and screaming. They're going to be wildly enthusiastic to vote for Donald Trump. But the binding means if they go and were to say, you know what, I've changed my mind, I'm a Nikki Haley delegate, under the rules, their vote still gets counted for Donald Trump and they get removed as a delegate. So technically, until convention, they're not the nominees, but functionally, they're both the nominees now.
Kind of historic also, and again, Lucien Smith is our guest this morning. Lucien, kind of, 1954, 57, since this has happened, a rematch?
That's right. The last time you had a rematch was in 1956 between Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson, who had run against each other 4 years before. So this is unusual in recent American history.
What is it going to take to get the people out to vote, though? I mean, I'd like to think out of the box a little bit. You don't want to force them to, but how about this? I was just thinking of something. How about if you did not vote, but you're on the voter rolls, then you are the ones who would be called first as far as jury duty. Let's put it that way.
It's always disappointing to see numbers this low, but I'll say, this was almost exactly where it was in 2020. I mean, within a couple of thousand votes of 2020, when we similarly had a more or less uncontested presidential race and a more or less, non-controversial Senate primary. I'll be honest, I've never been – I think everybody ought to vote. I think the thing that makes America great – I talked to my children about this yesterday when they went with us to vote. We get to choose our leaders, and there are millions of people who don't get that opportunity. I'm not a big fan of compulsory voting because I'm not sure if you don't care enough to show up. I'm not sure I want to force you to show up because I think you're probably the sort of person who's going to make dumb decisions on who our leaders are.
I'm pulling my I have voted sticker. I just noticed I put that on there yesterday. So I'll take that one off. Well, one of the great things, you can get in and out fast. I'll tell you that.
That's true.
As far as anything other than that made a little more news yesterday. I don't think it was any. We didn't have any mix-ups or anything like that.
Not really.
The machines that we're using now, lending itself toward paper ballots and verification are so easy and fast.
They're easy, they're fast, and the beauty of it is we've got that paper verification because the old touch screens, I say old, they were new when they were at one point, but the touch screens where all you have is the digital record, it just leaves too much room for somebody to come in and say this is rigged. That's not really how people voted. There's a virus was put in to change the votes. Well, if you can open that box up and go in and actually check the ballots, count it against the sign-in book, that does a lot to increase trust in elections. So, there really weren't any major mishaps yesterday.
There was a hearing. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but every Democrat voted against or spoke negatively and said no to the point of would you absolutely positively say that no illegals need to vote in the next federal election? And crazy. Not a single Democrat responded.
Absurd.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
It is crazy, and it shows you one of the reasons they want to keep that crisis at the border.
We have one soundbite on what they are doing behind the scenes from somebody who went viral a couple of days ago. And also want to ask you about the hearings yesterday when when Jim Jordan and some members of the House were questioning her. There were some things in that here. If you saw a little bit of it or you saw some videotape of it this morning, absolutely amazing. And I don't know about you, Lucien, but I felt like I was replaying the Christopher Wray, or not the Christopher Wray, the FBI guy at the time, and also Hillary Clinton being exonerated. Even though you're guilty of this, you're guilty of that, but, bless her sweetheart, she's okay. We'll talk about time. Back with former chairman of the Mississippi GOP, Lucien Smith. One of the things that frustrates me about Donald Trump, always has, and I think everybody else, even most of his base, is that when you are in a gunfight, don't give anybody any bullets. And I think it's a part of the fact that he's just not a seasoned, lifelong politician. For instance, Democrats are now going out on the attack on the former President Donald Trump, who raised the possibility of cuts to Social Security and Medicare. Now, I heard him, what he said during this interview. And during the interview on Monday, he said there's a lot, when he was asked, what can we do to save Social Security and Medicare? Because it's going to run out in 9 years as far as Social Security is concerned. And what the former president said, he said there's a lot that can be done on entitlements in terms of cutting. And then he went on to talk about what to cut, the waste and everything else. Well, the first thing you know is President Biden is parroting this, that he wants to cut Social Security. You just have to choose your words, especially when you have a whole lot of people out there selling the bullets for them, such as the media.
Yeah, I think that's right. I will say, in my experience managing and hiring people, what I have found is their strengths and their weaknesses are frequently just two sides of the same coin. And, that has certainly been Donald Trump's biggest weakness, is he is not a scripted, on-message politician. If he talked the way George W. Bush or Ronald Reagan did, he would be in his last year of his last term, wildly popular for all the stuff that he did. That said, if he talked like George Bush or Ronald Reagan, he would be the second son of a Queens real estate developer who you and I had never heard of. So that's part of the appeal.
Life has changed. Politics has changed. Here's that audio I was talking about, how what they are going to do during this election. Everybody is sitting on needles and pills because we don't know how far they're going to push it in November. We really don't. As far as harvesting, illegals, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, I just got off the phone with the county regarding voting. So for the state of California, it says, I am not registered with a qualified political party, and it's having me choose out of 3 different parties on this form. Choose one and then send it back. American Independent Party, Democratic Party, and Libertarian Party. Where's the Republican Party? I called the county, and I spoke with a very sweet gentleman. He stated that if you went to the DMV within the past few years and changed any kind of information and you did not fill out that portion correctly about registering to vote, then you have to re-register as a Republican to receive a ballot. I've been registered as a Republican since I was 18, but I just find that very odd that the Republican Party was not on this form for me to fill out.
I mean, just out in the open, send it to you, and the Republican Party's not even on there.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought when the Democrats accuse the Republicans of doing something, that's probably because they're doing it. And you always hear from the Democrats how the Republicans are trying to take people off the poll, off the rolls, make it more difficult for people to vote. And I think it's because, and the story from California is a good one. I think that's because where they can make it more difficult for Republicans to vote, they're probably trying to do that.
That's it. And
I'll say, Paul, what you used to see in presidential elections, everybody would run to the right or the left in the primaries, and then they'd pivot back to the center when they got to the general election. The Democrats, the last 2 cycles, have had a different strategy, and I think you're going to see it in a big way this time, which is to stay on the far left. I mean, they're not going to come back and get away from the craziness at the border, the craziness on gender, trying to raise taxes, runaway spending. They're just going to demonize Donald Trump in hopes that people in the middle will say, gosh, I can't stand what the Biden administration's doing, but they've convinced me democracy's going to end in November if I don't vote for Joe Biden, and I like democracy, so I'll hold my nose and vote for him. So I think the rhetoric this election is going to be like nothing we've seen.
It's the same thing they did the last time, but...
Oh, absolutely.
Your salve on that, or the thing that's going to make it a little bit harder, is at the kitchen table. They can see all these numbers.
That's right.
They know they're suffering, and I think that's going to some degree, some people are so just politically ignorant out there. They have no idea what's going on. But if you watched any of the hearings yesterday, it was absolutely amazing. And the first thing, and Lance and I talked about this earlier, we are just kind of shocked into this unbelief of when we're talking about Vice President Joe Biden back in those days taking all of these classified documents home. And we all forget, or nobody wants to bring this up, there's the violation right there. As Vice President,
right.
You are not able to do this. But we just kind of skip over that. And here's a little bit of the interview yesterday.
Mr. Herr, classified documents were found at the Penn Biden Center?
That's correct.
They were found in President Biden's garage?
In Wilmington, Delaware, yes.
And in his basement den?
Also in the same home, yes.
And his main floor office?
Correct.
And his third floor den?
Correct.
At the University of Delaware?
Correct.
And at the Biden Institute?
Correct.
I did not share classified information. I did not share it.
With your ghostwriter?
With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not.
But the special counsel said it.
No, I did not say that.
My team and I conducted a thorough, independent investigation. We identified evidence that the president willfully retained classified materials after the end of his vice presidency when he was a private citizen. This evidence included an audio-recorded conversation during which Mr. Biden told his ghostwriter that he had, quote, just found all the classified stuff downstairs, end quote. When Mr. Biden said this, he was a private citizen speaking to his ghostwriter in his private rental home in Virginia. We also identified other recorded conversations during which Mr. Biden read classified information aloud to his ghostwriter.
I did not share it. With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not. Guarantee you did not.
Just had to put that together. But here's a guy that issued so many lies, he's got to be in the Guinness Book of World Records, but he gets by it.
Well, it shows you how, to my mind, how political the prosecution of Donald Trump is over these classified information, because it certainly seems like every senior government official ends up with some classified information going out with them, probably because, and this has been talked about for at least 60 years, we overclassify everything. I mean, it's not like Donald Trump took the nuclear codes and was saying, hey, buddy, watch this. We're going to blow up Pyongyang. I mean, these are documents that, for the most part, probably didn't need to be classified. We just overclassify everything.
Couple of conversations between two leaders. Let's go out and get a drink, and it's classified.
Yeah, exactly. And look, they've been talking about this since at least the 60s, about how overclassification is a way for government bureaucrats to feel important. They classify things because then only they can see the information. And I'm drawing a blank on Hillary Clinton's predecessor in the U.S. Senate from New York, Moynihan, when he was he did a commission report in, I want to say, the 60s, that talked about exactly that you had these bureaucrats who wanted to feel powerful, and so they would take a document that really was innocuous, like you said, the president of France saying, hey, do you want to get some white wine later tonight, and say, well, this is so secretive and important, we got to put it over here in a classified section.
Code words.
It's code, yeah, exactly. So, which I think is the reason at the end of the day, like anytime somebody leaves a job, they go, this internal memo that we had, it sort of reminds me of my first day on the job. Heck, I'm going to take it. Not saying it's good, not saying it's legal, but the fact that Donald Trump, they're trying to send to jail for it, and Joe Biden, they're just completely ignoring it, I think speaks to the hypocrisy of that whole system.
And Trump also has a lot of, he considers it humor, and it is humor to most of us.
Absolutely.
And we know it's done in an off way when he says, I think Hannity asked him, you're not going to be a dictator, as some people said, and he's except day one.
Right.
Day one, I'm going to shut the border down. Day one, I'm going to start drilling, et cetera, et cetera.
Paul,
well, they take that out of context.
Look, I have this distinct memory when I was on the Republican National Committee of going to an event. It was just members of the committee and the president for a dinner, and he made what was obviously a joke about, gosh, these elections are a pain. We ought to get rid of elections. Everyone in the room laughed, knew it was a joke. Nobody thought he was serious about canceling elections. The next morning, Politico has a headline that says, Donald Trump tells Republican Party he intends to cancel elections. No one thought that. He didn't think that, but that's just how it goes.
Listen, who do you think is at risk? And boy, this is a long. I should have thought about this question. At risk. I'm thinking of the FBI. I'm thinking of Christopher Wray. I'm just thinking of so many people out there talking about moving to another country. Maybe they need to, because not retribution. Just you got to get rid of the crooked people up there, or the ones who are ineffective, and that's included the people who are just Democrats. But there are so many people out there in these agencies that don't need to be there anymore.
Well,
CIA, FBI.
Which I think what you saw with the Hur hearing, I mean, Hur managed to make everybody mad, right? The Republicans were unhappy, the Democrats were unhappy about him. But, just a little bit ago, back when Donald Trump was president, every time that there was some sort of criticism that came from the DOJ or somebody adjacent to the DOJ, we were told it's totally non-political. All of these people are basically monks. They never think about politics. Don't worry about it. And as soon as Hur suggested that Joe Biden might have a little bit of a senility problem, it was like an Etch-a-Sketch. They just shook it up and said, oh, no, we got political actors all through the DOJ. Look out.
Great analogy. Final segment coming up in a moment or two. Let me leave you with this one. One of the other questions during the hearing yesterday.
Based on the facts and anticipation of defenses presented in your report, could a reasonable juror have voted to convict?
As I said in the report, some reasonable jurors may have reached the inferences that the government would present in its case in chief at trial.
So a reasonable juror could have voted to convict based on the facts that you presented?
Correct.
Ooh, if it was a reasonable jury, then Joe Biden would have been convicted. Final segment's coming up next. Smith joins us, final segment here, and I was just thinking, if you were use a football analogy, what are we, halfway through the third quarter as far as the session's concerned, or...
Yeah, but it'd be if all the action in football happened in the second half, then yes, that'd be exactly right.
All right, let's see. Medicaid, where we stand with it? It's going nowhere fast, or what does it look like?
I mean, I think there are proposals in both chambers to expand the eligible population of Medicaid. They're pretty far apart, so it's going to be interesting to see where that gets. The House has a work, as I understand it, the House has a work requirement that and expands all the way to the maximum that's allowed, and then the Senate proposal doesn't allow the bill to go into effect unless the work requirement is approved by the federal government, and I think expands to a smaller number. So,
but the House doesn't have the requirement. It is going to be suggestive, but it'll go forth if it doesn't.
The House requires that the executive branch of the state go to CMS, which is the governing body for Medicaid, and request that CMS approve a work requirement. But the expansion population, expanding the population goes into effect no matter what CMS says.
Do you think there's enough momentum there, or the votes are going to be there to override, should the governor veto it?
Well, based on the vote in the House, yes. I think that was a veto-proof majority. Now, I think there's a question if the governor vetoes it. How many of the people who were willing to vote yes on the substance are then willing to override the Republican governor? But I think you're right. That is going to be one of the big dramas of this session, whether the House and Senate can come together on a version that they both like. Now, if I was in the governor's office, I would be trying to stir up as much disagreement on the Senate and House positions as possible so that the bill didn't pass, so he wasn't put in a position where he had to veto the bill and then have an override fight on a substantive bill.
So it'd be like Tyson versus Paul. This is Inspire versus MAEP. Who's going to win on this one?
I hope we get a new formula. That's my view. I have not studied either of the proposals, but I've always thought, or I've thought for a long time, we needed to look into a new formula. But I'll be honest, because I have a great deal of faith in the education chairman in both chambers. I've not studied either proposal, so I should probably do that before deciding which one's better.
I haven't studied them, but from what it sounds like, it's more equitable from Inspire by far, and it's one of the reasons the formula that you have in MAEP that hasn't been, because of some of the numbers, the way they do this and divvy out money, is some of the reasons that even though we've got more money than we've had in a while.
Well, it's turned into
it hasn't been allocated.
It's been, and I will say, Republicans have spent more money on education than any time in history. It just hadn't all gone through MAP. It's gone to focusing on the results from the classroom, not just the inputs.
Thinking about some of the other hot button items, school choice looks like it's going to be in a study committee or something. They'll kick it over to that.
I'd be happy to be wrong, but my sense is school choice is dead for this year, which I think is a shame. We've got Alabama is moving towards universal school choice. Arkansas is moving to universal school choice. Tennessee has got universal school choice. Louisiana will probably, with Jeff Landry's election, do it. So we're the donut hole surrounded by a big juicy donut of freedom and good education. And even after everything we did 10 years ago, we're choosing not to do that. So I hope that the study commission isn't a way to kick this can down the road 20 years. I hope at worst we're coming back next year with a real robust effort on school choice.
I think that donut's getting more and more defined as Governor Huckabee Sanders does things like this, going after the personal income tax and everything else. So you're right.
Well, I mean, it's not like we're coming up with this school choice idea. We're the first state that's doing it. It's been done all over the country. It's being done all around us. We've seen the results. It improves educational attainment both among people who remain in the public schools and those who choose one of the alternative tracks that this would allow. So I hope that we will see. I hope we'll see meaningful school choice in a year.
We will not be closing prisons. I think that one's gone. As far as the I was looking for a list here. I got a list of all of the names, and the list is about 5 pages in small print. People have suggested about it's got to be 1,000 or more on here. But what's going to happen with that one?
I would, I hope that goes through. It doesn't make sense for the taxpayers to continue to subsidize 8 universities in the state. I understand people are immensely connected to the W. I got a lot of family that went to the W. I mean, I told when I was in for you talking to the president, I told her, my father still calls it MSCW because that's what he grew up calling it when he had siblings there. But it doesn't make sense for the taxpayers to be subsidizing these universities to honor the memories that people have from there.
Lucien, you think that'll get hit a study committee also during the summer?
We'll see. It's going to hit a bunch of unhappy alumni when it gets over to the west end of that building.
It has raised the hackles.
No doubt about it.
Man, always thank you. Number one. Number two, thank you for being a stand-in when I just need a break there. And I appreciate you very, very much.
Thanks.